Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Chente from Speaking Code podcast. Yes, this must mean it is once again midnight lycanthropy time here on StarFox Radio. I do hope everyone is ready for the madness that is going to ensue. Absolutely delicious. Well, without further ado, it is time for Chente and myself to take a walk into the darkness known as the Dogman phenomenon. My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We have an amazing co-host slash guest tonight that I've collaborated with before. He is a friend of mine and the North American Dogman Project, Chente from Speaking Code, a very up and coming podcast that I will have a link to for everyone to check out. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
Hey man, I'm doing good. Thanks a lot for having me.
Of course, it's been a minute since we all get to sit down, and it's good to kind of catch back up and see what's new. So, you've been up to anything good?
Yeah, man, just been working on the podcast and just researching stuff, but I'm very interested and excited for tonight's episode with you. I'm ready to learn.
Appreciate that. No, thank you very much. It's very kind words. And what I'm going to do here is, whereas, like you said, you just want to try to seep up some knowledge, I am going to give you center stage here, and you can pretty much roll with the mic, my friend.
All right. Thanks. So the first thing I want to say is so when you came on our podcast, you blew our minds from the jump with the Dogman stuff. But where are the most sightings at in the U.S.?
Very kind words. I appreciate that. And since then, as if you would have thought I could have stuffed more into my brain, but I have. So it's definitely a growing entity, I like to call it, or ecosystem inside of my head, is how I look at it with just knowledge that's put in there. And you would be surprised. It's actually traditionally, just because of the historical references, I like to call it the square. You know how you have the Texas and Dogman triangle? Well, in pretty much the area you just asked about, it's like a big square. Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Wisconsin, pretty much right in that area. I would say more or less, if I had to pick like the heart of the Dogman sighting or the heart of the Dogman entity itself, the phenomenon, it would probably be that location.
Do they go by different names in the U.S.? Or you know how like Bigfoot goes by different names? Does it change on regions?
Very great question. And yes, actually, it does per indigenous culture and also in overall areas. Like you said, I mean, the Dogman was dubbed in the Michigan, Wisconsin kind of area. And then you have Bearzilla, which is down in Kentucky. And then you have the Watts Valley ape cat, which is out on the West Coast in California. Then you have the saber wolf, which is up north and near like the Yukon territory. There's a ton of different names for them, and then you can reach back in the historical aspects with like the cynocephali. So yeah, there's definitely a ton of variations, and we're actually working on some theories right now that the short-faced bear, as well as giant baboons and current species of baboons that do exist, the dire wolf, also in cave hyenas, never went extinct. And we actually have a lot of evidence supporting that theory. And our science team's been diving into that too. So there would be some more variations as well. I shouldn't say I and some other people within the North American Dogman Project believe probably at least 50% of the sightings are of those potentially supposed extinct animals that I just referred to. But then you have some of the other ones that are more manifestations, which is definitely out of my research range, or negative energy, hellhounds, etc. So
Yo, would you call it cynocephali? Is that
yes,
what you
that took
said?
some practice. Cynocephali,
Yo,
yes.
all right, cynocephali. That's the one. Correct me if I'm wrong, which I might be wrong, but that's the one that like Alexander the Great, Christopher Columbus, the Romans, and like the Greeks too, I believe they all wrote about, right?
All right. You got 98% of that right. Christopher Columbus
I'll
did
take it.
speak. Yeah, yeah. Christopher Columbus did speak of dog-like or human-like creatures that resembled that from Native American lore over here. Yeah, the ones that you were referring to, the cynocephali, we would just remove his name and put in Marco Polo, and then everything else you said is correct.
All right, so Marco Polo, yeah, yeah, yeah. So those are the ones I also heard about that. That I don't know who it was who wrote about it, but they're saying that they didn't talk, they just barked,
Astute
communicated.
observation. And yes, you are correct. They were unable to speak any sort of quote unquote a modern day language as we look upon things. But yeah, animals do communicate just because it's not English or Spanish or French. I mean, they're speaking to each other. But yes, they were reported to wear clothing, also the skins of other animals, and they would come and trade with villagers, and they would do sign language and bark and be able to communicate back and understand what was being told to them and interact. But no, they were not able to form words such as you and I are speaking.
Makes sense, makes sense. So that's like that has to be like 4,000 or more, right? Years ago? Old anyway?
290 BC.
Yeah, man. So it's pretty great evidence, yeah?
It's definitely a minute ago. And yeah, when it comes to historical stuff, that's really what I try to use more than, say, modern day evidence. And the reason I state that is unfortunately we live in a day and age with hoaxing and trying to get clout. Yeah, in the past, there wasn't really reasons to speak of such things like that. And I'll give you an example. I mean, look at the medieval times where some of these reports were coming in. That type of stuff was taboo. And if you go around just telling everyone that you saw a werewolf, or quote unquote it's eating your livestock, or people are going to think you're the werewolf, and bad things might have occurred to you. So in the past, when people were speaking of this, especially when it was more taboo, it tends to bring a little bit more credence in my eyes. But also, I do approach everything subjectively and objectively as a healthy skeptic. And the problem is, you, no matter what, would like to think that Alexander the Great and all these people were 100% truthful. I don't know. You and I weren't back then and living back then. So he could have also, I guess, come up with some interesting story just to use as clout. But then the problem is, you have other people that weren't associated with him around that time frame, and also historically, that still report seeing that. So then that kind of plugs a hole into that whole theory, because why are other people that didn't have direct contact again speaking of seeing these things?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great explanation right there. That was good. What about so when you look at this stuff, when you're researching it, you seem the type, and you told us before too that you aren't trying to like convince people that this thing's real, and you do an amazing job at that. But is it hard for you sometimes to, when you're researching, to take a hat off and be like, to look at it completely false and try to find truth? Or do you look at it and then you just instantly know, since you've been doing this so long, that it's a hoax?
Very kind words, man. I appreciate all that. And yes, that's exactly how I do try to approach it. And it's not impossible. Nothing's impossible to pick up on hoaxes. You just got to make sure that when you do see something, you send it to people that you know are experienced even more than myself and that I value their opinion more than mine, and just get feedback before I really put together any sort of drastic concern or judgment or stamp of approval on something for sure. And people definitely, I try to be super chill and just like you said, I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just trying to show, look, hey, for example, the cave hyena thing, there are tracks that are being found around North America that are not bear, that look pretty similar to bear. The thing is, especially if someone has an untrained eye, they wouldn't really be able to differentiate that. Okay. And people are going missing. They did exist. So I'm not sitting here trying to tell somebody, hey, this animal exists or didn't exist. I don't need to say that. Science tells everybody the cave bear, the cave hyena, they existed. Okay. So that's science right there. I'm not making that up. Science is telling us that. I can see the bones. I can see the fact that they might even still be alive because 10,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago is a blink of an eye. And there's no reason any of those predators would have gone extinct, minus the fact of they would run out of food, but they wouldn't have run out of food because, if anything, the more modern day food is easier. And for example, a short faced cave bear is a much better version of a grizzly bear, faster, stronger. Okay, so if it was taking down larger versions of moose back in 10,000 years ago or whatever, why would it have any issue now feeding a moose and caribou? It wouldn't. And especially if it's faster than a grizzly bear. So this is all like science right there. And I don't need to, explain that to anybody. People can always fact check, and I encourage people to, and just I encourage people to want to learn in general and just go out there and listen to people that have great views and great evidence, but then also, read other sources just to make sure that you're verifying things. And you'll see everything right there that I stated is happening, where people are missing, the strange footprints, the strange reports. So, yeah, I don't, in my eyes, really feel like I need to verify or validate anything. And I try to approach it with just a very chilled mannerism. And 96% of the time, I am successful at it, but unfortunately, every once in a while, somebody kind of gets under my skin. Meaning, I got invited to a cryptozoology Discord that has a pretty large following. So I posted some of my research and work, and immediately some people made some pretty humorous comments, but also it's very off-putting when somebody invites you to their Discord, yet some of their moderators or members immediately have that type of response. And then when you do respond, they say there's no scientific evidence, blah, 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 blah. And I found myself where I shouldn't even have responded in the first place. But then I respond again at being like, well, actually, there is science. And then they're like, well, why are people using the term dogman if you're talking about baboons? Because they can't even wrap their head around something that actually a baboon looks very werewolf like, and pointed ears and huge manes and massive teeth. And same thing with hyenas, yet hyenas have no relation to canines, nor do baboons. Okay, so whoever saw those or sees those, yes, says a canine looking creature. Baboons have bent back legs like a canine looking creature. Okay, but they couldn't even wrap their mind around that. So then I just put up a gif of somebody just waving, and then I ended up just leaving the Discord. So I shouldn't even have responded to that. And like I said, I'm a huge preacher of always taking the high road, and Man, I do almost every point in time, but for some reason, I was just really put off by that because cryptozoology is supposed to be the study of prehistoric, unknown, maybe even potentially still existing animals. And the fact that they can't wrap their mind around that, but yet they can wrap their mind about something such as, say, Mothman or reptilians or things that don't even have as close to much merit as what you and I are talking about right now, because then they think what you're presenting is fraudulent, yet there's so much evidence for it. So it's interesting and it's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, hey, if someone doesn't want to look at things that are factual, that's okay. That's not on me. That's on them, you know?
Yeah, man. What kind of scientific like stuff are you bringing to the table for Mothman though? Like, I never heard of that.
That's a very valid question. And that's really, honestly, my response would be 90% of other cryptids or even more. Okay, I'm not even trying to be boisterous here because I researched the Dogman. Just facts here, okay? I have 536 pages just of myself of these encounters, okay? And they go all the way back to 290 BC. Some people like to say, oh, well, there was no evidence of dogman reports until the DJ in Michigan started saying that. That's not true. They were just called different things and had different terminologies. The Native Americans were speaking about that way before. So that's just like so ignorant for people to even try to view it as that, because now we're discrediting indigenous cultures that were here way before any modern day man, and they have reports about this. So how are we trying to as a community say, oh, this didn't start happening until the Michigan DJ? That's not true, though, as I just stated. So when you look at these other cryptids, yeah, some of it's cool, but there's really no evidence at all, okay? There is just as much evidence for something taking people in cave systems that looks canine-ish, whether it's baboon, hyena, short-faced bear, because bears look like canines too, okay? They have snouts, and they are part of, in the past, basically a tweener called the Amphicenoidae that was neither canine nor wolf or dog. It was like an in between, because that's how bears and dogs branched off. Okay, so same thing with that. Yes, when it comes to Sasquatch, UFOs, and Dogman, there's probably just as much evidence for all of those, or even if not some more for Dogman. Nobody can really show you much more for Loch Ness Monster than things that really look potentially like a log or something. Okay, I'm not talking about pictures that are blurry here where the pareidolia type images. I'm talking about actual footprints where we have a tracker on our team that can see this thing walking quadrupedally and bipedally off. Okay, well, baboons walk quadrupedally and bipedally. Okay, what is doing this? So we're actually talking about something, not just a blurry image. There's footprints here that are not known to quote unquote existing species. So how did it get here? Okay, if they look like hyena tracks, is it somebody's pets, or does somebody have a game reserve in the United States with spotted hyenas that they've let out to hunt secretly, or that they've just escaped, or are they relatives or cave hyenas that still do exist? I mean, in 1890, you had the ringdocus that looks like either some sort of strange hyena or maybe a dire wolf. That's 1890 here we're talking about, and it's stuffed. I encourage anyone to look at it as well. So it's really not so far fetched to think that some of these quote unquote ancient species that fall into dogman sightings are still kicking around. I mean, like I said before, 11,000, 12,000 years ago, in science and evolutionary aspects, and just the world itself is a blink of the eye.
Yeah. Um, Evolutionary stuff I want to get into next. Since well, actually, before I do that, um, Dogman, do you think they came to Earth like kind of like an extraterrestrial thing, or they were like native before humans came around?
Ooh, okay, now you're asking me some stuff that is definitely, I would, if I wish I had somebody else that knows more about this response that I'm going to give you, because I definitely know more about the physical aspects, like I was saying, being an existing type entity, more or less like the animal side of it. So
Mhm.
I've heard people say that about it being from solar system called the Canis Major, okay? And within it
Mhm.
there is Cyrus, which is basically looks like a dog or a maybe wolf. And that's really interesting because there are reports that it could have been or is extraterrestrial based in regards of coming from outer space or maybe that solar system, and maybe that's where Anubis oriented or became Anubis himself. And I also have an interesting hypothesis that maybe Anubis could have been a cynocephaly as well, that I wouldn't want to say tricked, but outsmarted maybe the Egyptians. And because of that, they viewed him as a god, and he had some sort of special stature in their society because obviously they are intellectual enough to come down and trade with people. And if a culture has never seen a cynocephaly or a entity like that, it would be interesting for sure and could be potentially worshipped. So there's definitely a lot with that. Like I said, I don't know too much or as much as others when it comes to the extraterrestrial aspect, but I do know the North American Dogman Project breaks it down into paranormal, extraterrestrial, or physical. And physical and extraterrestrial are the ones that are the highest in regards of what people think.
Nice. That Canis Major, you said Cyrus, when some people could say Sirius in the Sirius radio, the XM radio, before they
Mhm.
merged, it was a dog with a star on its face. Do you remember that? The logo?
I do not, and that's pretty interesting as well, right there. So yeah, that would tie back into that whole solar system aspect or the star system right there. So that's an interesting twist too.
The Anubis thing, you already hit on that. That's a pretty big one. You think he could have just been smarter, maybe?
Well, just think of, I guess, with any sort of culture or anything, more or less. I mean, let's just say with a
I
modern
was going
day
to try to break it
culture.
down in tribes, right?
Well, just think if there are still primitive type tribes across the globe that live in,
Hmm.
situations that are not considered modern. So, say if somebody like you or myself or somebody else can show up with your cell phones and you look different than them and you have like cool different looking clothes because they don't wear that type of stuff, and you talk different and you just come in with this crazy type technology like the cell phone from out of this world and such. Just think maybe how they might view you too. They might potentially be like, wow, who is this? Where did he come from? So we live in obviously modern times where we understand where people are coming from other areas. But in the past, especially when cultures didn't have direct correlation or connections with each other, if somebody came in like that, imagine if we were in a, more primitive based tribe and Anubis or a cynocephaly came into our village, or even not even that, even a person, say if you and I were in the Amazon, right? And somebody came in from Europe, an extremely tall, pale skinned, long haired individual, but they had all this different stuff like metal swords or armor, and you and I were using, bamboo and such. We would probably look at them as maybe, wow, where'd you come from?
Yeah. Just a higher entity in general.
Yeah, so then we could either potentially worship them or we could then look at them as an enemy. So I'm not saying or taking away from anything about, extraterrestrials coming down and people worshiping them. I'm just trying to say that, again, I'm just trying to give an example of a living or existing person coming to a different culture of how there would still be that kind of awestruckness. Okay. And I've seen it before with Survivor Man. Actually, now that we're speaking about it, when he's done some of his global travels, he would sit down with some cultures that had never seen somebody that really looked like him, and they were playing with his hair, his ears, and just because he looked a lot different and they had never seen it. You see what I'm saying? They're gonna have that wow. And now if that individual can all of a sudden just create like a shelter for you like he was, or build fire, or if say Anubis could do something special, of course he's going to be cherished, or they're going to be cherished or welcomed.
Yeah. To this day, man, you saw one standing in your yard. I mean, yeah, I don't know what you're gonna do, but I'll be like, holy shit. I don't know. have you had encounters?
I have actually never had any sort of paranormal encounters, my friend. I've never seen anything extraterrestrial based, or the only thing that I can even remotely come to say with that, and it's not a cryptid because mountain lions do exist, is when I was a little bit younger, I saw a mountain lion get hit. But I mean, we don't fully acknowledge that mountain lions live in Maine. There's trail cams up here of other ones as well, just around the area and stuff. So that would be the only super cool thing, I guess, more or less, when it comes to what we're talking about that I've seen. And mountain lions are existing animals. So
Yeah, okay. Nice. I feel like if you did encounter a dog man, you would know it. Like from the jump, you'd be like, oh no, this one's this and this, and your friends would be like, what are you talking about? We gotta run.
yeah, I mean, that's what I always try to tell people when it comes to the whole TikTok thing, or as if someone's streaming on social media. I mean, just think about it logically, okay? People are just so lost when it comes to logic now. I mean, if you and I were out there and a mountain lion's running after you, or I mean, I was driving by, but okay, not one point in time would I have thought. I mean, it did get hit, but like I said, if something was happening like that, I wouldn't think to just pull my phone out. Okay, if we were being chased by a bear, a mountain lion, or a wolf, and anyone thinks they're just going to pull out their social media and that's going to stop, it doesn't work like that. Two brothers just recently got attacked in California, and guess what happened? One of them threw the backpack at the animal trying to stop it, and it still came at him. Not at one point in time did they pull out their cell phone or anything. They were the whole point in time trying to struggle for their survival. Okay, so now if we're talking about this Dogman or these Sasquatch that are taking people, etc., who in their right frame of mind is going to be able to just pull their phone out and get this footage? No, you're going to turn and run. And if you do stand there, no one's ever going to find you, because same thing with the grizzly bear. If you stand there and the rest of your friends turn off and run, well, they're going to turn back around and wonder where you are, and you're going to be being consumed by the grizzly bear. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. Um, I have one more to bring up. I don't know. I heard about this one. I tried to look up some stuff today. This one stuck out to me a lot. I don't know. I should have wrote it down, but I don't know if it was Saint Christopher or Saint Augustine that had an encounter with the dog man and like kind of brought it into Christianity. Is that something you've heard of or no?
So I've heard a little bit about that, and I again wish I had somebody else around that knew more about the religious aspects, because I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, so I don't know really anything along the lines of more or less the Bible or such, but I do, or I am aware of those because they've been presented to me by other people. But like I said, so I'm super spiritual and try to be a good person and take care of Earth, etc. But I don't really know about that. You actually just informed me a little bit about telling how it was merged into, or he was merged into that. But I do know that St. Christopher did have a dog head. And again, that is now some more historical references that are being presented. The only thing with, say, religion and paranormal type stuff is the scientific community will never really take that at face value. So hearing and seeing things like the St. Christopher's head are useful to learn a little bit more, but not useful when trying to write a thesis and presenting it to somebody, because you need to make sure that you are showing evidence and science and what's being presented to you. And the scientific community thinks as evidence such as bones, DNA, hair samples, something in front of you. So what I'm trying to do with this is why I am approaching it with the fact that the short-faced bear, cave hyenas, and some of the other animals I have mentioned are still existing, is because if science is supposed to be doing its job, well, those are things that we do know that are existing. So they can't really turn away from that when you present that to them and show them, hey, well, what are these tracks? And here are cave systems, and here are some of the missing people, etc. But if you were just to try to sit down and tell them, hey, these biblical reports, or the fact that I was so and so came out of a portal, etc. Science would never take a second to speak to anybody about that. So until they take that as credible and meritable, like I said, I just try to approach it, I guess, as scientifically as possible, meaning playing by the scientific community's rules as to what they accept for evidence.
Got it. Got it. Do you know the most I don't know if popular is or most heard of encounter is?
You have a bunch of them, but I would say most likely, and no one can even really verify it, and it's probably the lamest flex in the Dogman game is the LBL supposed massacre that happened back, I believe was like the early 80s. Yet, besides that, you have some other ones that are questionable. So the thing is, with a lot of the more mainstream encounters, there's just a lot of questions kind of about what has occurred during those. And a lot of the more smaller, quicker type encounters are just as important. So I don't really know if there's any one that should be listed as more important than the other, but I think when it comes to everyone's flex in the Dogman game, it's always the LBL, the land between the lakes, that area.
It's all right. So it seems like how like Bigfoot and all that is more like genuine, like it's accepted and people just go on about their day. But when you bring up Dogman, there is a lot of people that don't really pay attention to it or scoff you off. But then you find groups like that, the North American Dog Project group you have on. I don't know if it's yours, but you're a big part of it on Facebook.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that. No, that's actually Jody Cook's group. He's the one. Well, I mean, I have my subdivision group, but the North American Dogman Project is his foundation that he created back in, I believe it was 2006 or 2001, one of those dates. Yeah, I mean, he was researching before then, but yeah, no, it's definitely the largest Dogman investigation group core globally, and our website is getting almost 40,000 views a month right now, which is pretty cool. So
So yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up. You find groups like that, and there's so much info in there, and it's not like how Bigfoot people push a lot of merchandise and it's like a lot of TV stuff, money. They want money pretty much. But for these groups, it's all support. Like they all post their videos, they all give each other support, and it's all like people just spitting facts.
it's definitely tough, and that's a very valid observation right there for sure. And I mean, we can definitely dive into some more aspects of that in the future if you'd like. And it's hard to really pinpoint that down because that's like a good and bad thing. I think the Dogman community is one of the most warped, sideways communities whatsoever, meaning everyone thinks they know everything and no one wants to learn anything. And that's not how I approach things. And also, everyone thinks they're an expert. And the problem with being an expert is that individual or individuals have closed their mind off to incoming information because they think that they're at the peak. So being called an expert is definitely kind words, and it's okay for someone to call you that, but as myself, I would never look at myself as an expert because I'm always trying to learn and seep in new information. And someone that is an expert in their mind is going to want to stop learning because they think they have it all figured out. So I just try to, like I said, just approach things and listen and learn and put things together and just piece out and weed out the bad information and collectively put together the good stuff.
What you doing? A hell of a job, bro.
No, I appreciate that, my friend. It's very kind words and always good to sit down and talk with you. And like I said, I always encourage you too, man. I mean, I appreciate you definitely valuing my opinion on things, but I also encourage you to, when you get a chance, just, fact check all that. Do your own research too, man. And just validate things. That's okay for people to do. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that and just take too much or too many people at face value or not enough at face value. I think it's okay to, like I said, do your own research in life and ask good, healthy, skeptical questions. I think we as people tend to not want to do that, and we just don't want to see the truth or find the truth. We claim we do, but we just seem to like a good soap opera or a good story at the end of the day. Because if we all really do want to figure out something, I mean, they figure out different dinosaur species and subspecies all the time. Okay, you know why? Because they want to figure it out, and that's how you figure things out. But if you don't want to figure out something like that, then that's just how people end up not wanting to present certain things or hiding evidence, or it's just not really a good way to approach it. And that's why I've tried to distance the way I approach things separately from that, because I always do want to learn. And if I wanted to play in my own mud puddle or my own sandbox, well, what am I ever going to gain from that? And the reason I use those terminologies is it really is, kind of childish as to how, unfortunately, people approach things just in general in life and in this community or other communities. Or like, I mean, there's a ton of great scientists out there that won't even sit down and listen to somebody about something. So no, there's definitely more work that needs to be done, but I do appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, man. Dogman needs to get more mainstream. We get some more eyes on it, man. It's really interesting, and I feel people blow it off a lot because the name Dogman, they're like, oh, it's just a dog or a giant dog or a wolf. I feel like people dismiss it for a wolf a lot, but I feel like these things have been around way longer than any other cryptid, which I don't really know a lot about. But if if I may be so brave to say,
That's an excellent observation. And I think that falls into the line of what I was saying with people that just see something and they don't have an educated eye. And I'll give a quick example before we tie this up. If someone didn't know what a kangaroo was, okay, and kangaroos had never been documented as a living species, and someone had just seen a kangaroo pop up out of the bushes from its waist up, okay? And it's like nighttime, kind of. Well, a kangaroo has a massive chest. It looks like a bodybuilder, and they will slap you and punch you, and they have articulated hands. They have a long snout. Their eyes will glow with reflection, just like any other animals. They have pointed ears. Yeah, obviously predators have different glows, but more or less what I'm trying to say is if someone had never seen this kangaroo, what's that going to potentially look like? That looks like some sort of dog man. Like, oh, because her head looks doggish, right? It's got a chest like a man. It's a dog man. But we all know now kangaroos have nothing to do with canines, more or less. So I just think it's a misconception. And if people can't really step outside of that to understand it's just a terminology of someone dubbing that it doesn't have to be canine based, then you can't really break down that barrier.
yep, that was great.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here in the Fox Den, yes, on Star Fox Radio. If you did enjoy this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it. Make sure to feed the algorithm. And until next time, remember there are things that are darker than night.